So what yard was it your gran was in, sorry?
Well, I don't know whether it was actually called a yard there, because you went in the front, just towards the side of the church, but then the back went out into Friar's Gate, which is, leading on to Chapel House and that now. And there's one or two houses that ran that way, but they had got use of the yard from their side, but there was only grandma's from this side, from the from the main road side. Well, Sheepy Road, I suppose. No, Church, leading off Church Road down into Sheepy Road. Of course, there was all little cottages across the road then, and then they pulled those down at the back of the Angel, top of the Angel. So, and Grandpa had never worked after. He was an immaculate man. I can always remember. Immaculately dressed. Ruled everybody with a rod of iron. If you walked in and the football results was on Saturday afternoon, you just took a deep breath and waited till the last result was there.
So when did you leave your yard?
Just over 60 years ago, we went down to Mansetta. Of course, we'd got no furniture big enough to put into a house, it was, but I remember the one luxury we did have, my dad bought a television. And I always remember Mum saying, if only we'd had a smaller television, we could have had a bigger settee or something, but it was a...
Was your house in Mansetta a new build?
Yes, it was one of the old, they pulled them down, haven't they now, but there was one of the Waits houses, the concrete block houses, and we were one of the very first ones down there. I remember the paper coming and taking photos of us in this house, And
so where in Mansetta was that?
In Manor Road.
Manor Road.
Because there was all Waits houses. It was called Waits houses because that's the firm that built them. And then, of course, they've been pulled down in recent years, and smaller houses, smaller gardens. I don't know about the houses. I think the houses are much smaller as well, because they've built so many houses down there to what was originally, because everybody had got massive gardens, because everybody grew vegetables in that, didn't they, in those days? So we used to have a lawn and flowers around it, and then the rest of it was all vegetables. And then my dad kept greyhounds, which was...
That was in Mansetta?
That was in Mansetta, yes. He'd always been a greyhound fan. At the front entrance to the yard, there was a greengrocer's, and I think his name was Stan Shilton. It was definitely Shilton, and I think it was Stan Shilton. On the other side was Mrs. Hunt, and a lot of people will still remember Mrs. Hunt. That was a confectioner's. And then the dwellings behind the shops, I know Mrs. Hunt definitely lived in hers, but I'm not sure about Mr. and Mrs. Shilton, whether they did. And then there's two more to the left of the yard, and then two more at the top of the yard. And then behind Mrs. Hunt's shop there was, I think there were two dwellings, and then the rest of the buildings were the wash house and the toilets. I've got a feeling there was 3 toilets there. Of course, the whole yard had to use them. My mum, she was absolutely immaculate in every way. And I vaguely remember as children, she used to strip us down every night before we went to bed. Didn't matter how she felt or whatever, we had to have this stripped wash every night. One night, whether she wasn't feeling well or whether it was a school holiday, I just can't quite remember. She let us go to bed without being washed. And at 10 o'clock she come and woke us up because it was worrying her too much that she'd sent the children to bed without being washed. And she woke us up and she says, I've got to give you a wash. Of course, we were all grumbling, I remember. But she insisted that we got up and we had to be washed before we could go back to bed again. I think it must have been a school holiday, because I don't think she would have got us up at that time of night had we been going to school the next morning, you know. So I think it might have been a school holiday. And of course, there was the ritual tin bath in front of the fire on a Friday night. That was always Friday nights.
One after the other.
One after the other. The biggest started first, and then the water cooled down a bit for the next one. So, but I remember this night when she got us up. Of course, the last thing that the children want to do is get up and be washed, isn't it? You know. But yeah, so I do vaguely remember that. So. And of course, she told me the story many years afterwards as well. You know, do you remember the night that I got you up to wash? Oh, we do, Mum, yeah. But she was so particular, so particular.
What school did you go to?
I went to the North infants and then juniors. My youngest brother, who was only 5 when we moved, and I don't know why. He went to the Catholic school, probably because it was nearer to where we lived. I don't really know why he went to the Catholic school, but he went there. And then he went to South Junior afterwards. I suppose most of his friends were at the Catholic school then. But then I went on to Atherstone High School and loved every minute of my school days, absolutely.
Do you remember the ball game?
I do, yes, but I was always a little afraid of it. We always I remember coming up one Shrove Tuesday, and standing at the bottom of Church Street and remembering this whoosh of people, and I just run up to my grandma's, you know, because, and I can't stand it even to this day. I can't stand it. I can't see what pleasure anybody gets out of it. I like the history part of it, but, you know, and I've got a friend who lives in Ashbourne, and of course they do a really big...
Yeah, that's with the river and everything, isn't it?
A 2-day event, that is, you know. And but no, it's not my cup of tea at all.
Do you remember any incidents during ball game day?
I always remember it being as a really friendly... it's funny how things stick, but I remember it being a really friendly, and the children always used to have half an hour or so of kicking the ball up and down before it was let loose on the others. But I don't remember all the violence that there is these days.
Do you remember the pennies being thrown?
Yes, the pennies being thrown, and they used to throw sweets, dozens and dozens of sweets. And I do remember it. They used to take it up and they'd be in the canal, or, you know, they'd come back absolutely sodden, you know. But I've never understood the concept of it, to be perfectly honest, but I do appreciate the historical part of it, you know. So,
not for you.
Not for me, definitely not for me, no.